You're going to love this. So my staff tells me when I'm at America Fest, Charlie Kirk's event with like 30,000 people. And someone says to me, Sean Kelly, I got an interview with Sean Kelly. Now, here's the hilarious thing. Donald Trump has Barron telling him who to go do podcasts with because he hasn't heard of these people. Well, I hate to say it, but this Sean Kelly is way more famous than me, but it's in another generation. He's got millions of people listening to him. And he's kind of like interesting. He's a tall young man, I don't know, his 20s. And it was a really rough interview because we had headsets on and there was this really weird distortion. I mean, it sounded like bass, like, I don't know, it sounded like some music coming through really loud in our head. But both of us, I would just say it was like spiritual warfare. And we were trying to talk. You can't see it, but he can't really hear me and I can't really hear him. We both have headphones and there's this noise in our headphones. But in the midst of that interview, the truth comes out. And what's interesting is, I want you to imagine, this is going out to 500,000 secular, like people don't even know the Lord. They're not Christians, but I'm explaining Dominion, Seven Mountains, whatever. I just do what I got to do. And I'm trying to overcome the opposition of what we're having in the headphones. But it didn't matter. I wanted you to get the interview because it's powerful. And I want you to get a hold of this 30-day devotional because I got some of these devotional pages here for 30 days are powerful power-ups. You know, you've already blown it with a lot of your New Year's resolutions, right? They're not happening or you're struggling, or you're trying to get them going. This will help you. I give you all that you need to know. Just go to lancewallnau.com/toolkit. Call 1-800-910-6349. I'm going to give you a CD on you're authorized to do wild stuff this year. And you want to get my 30-day power-up devotional, something for every day. And watch this crazy Sean Kelly interview. You'll love it.
All right, guys, we are at America Fest today. I got Lance here from Dallas. Thanks for coming on, man.
It's a pleasure.
Let's get it cracking. So you're one of your main missions is like transforming mindsets, right? A scarred mindset.
Yeah, well, what I basically do is I change the orientation of faith people to realize that they're living in a kind of like a smaller world than they're supposed to be living in. So years ago, I got this revelation on 7 mountains of culture. And those 7 mountains are literally like this senator was dying and actually died for like 28 minutes, Michael Krotz in Georgia. And when he was gone out of his body, he had a vision. And the vision, he told me, he said, it's these 7 mountains were part of the vision. And the vision was that Jesus was going to send him back and he was to run it for an office in politics. And he did. And he came out and then he met me later. He said, I became a senator and I got into politics. He said, but you're like the first person that's ever talked about what I saw up there. When Jesus showed me, I had to come back into my body. I saw these spheres, these spheres of influence, and believers were rising up in them. And the Lord told me in the last days, believers were going to rise up and stand in their sphere. You're doing it here with a podcast.
Yeah.
He said, what's interesting was they weren't preachers. They were ordinary people with professions who had fused their faith into their work, and somehow their work became a kingdom expression. And where they were in a shaking world, things weren't shaking. And so he said there was a stability and an authority that was in them. So that got me to thinking, what is the difference between a believer who is like a Christian expecting to go to heaven, just kind of going through earth like a pilgrim, like Peter said, or somebody who is actually engaging the world around them so as to become an influence within that world. So that's kind of what got me started with the 7 Mountain mission.
So you had an out-of-body experience?
No, he did. The senator did.
Oh.
So I interviewed him, and he gave me the data on it and his own experience. And ever since then, I've been talking about how believers need to rise up in different fields. So what happens is I run into Christians that then feel like they're called to go into business or to make money or to become do movies or to go into politics. But a voice comes to them and says, yeah, that isn't really God because that's all about you. And they kind of like feel like if they're really going to be holy, they should be a missionary, they should be a preacher, or they should be, a musician. And that's the mindset that I'm up against.
Right. So what do you think that voice is? Do you think it's ego, or what do you think's going on when they hear that inner voice?
Well, I think personally, I think that the devil is real And that the power of that voice is that it infuses itself into the internal dialogue of a person. So when you're having those thoughts, you never think like the devil. You think, oh, it's just an idea. Never occurs to you to test the idea. So the Bible says at the Last Supper, Satan having put it into the heart of Judas to betray Jesus. Once a thought becomes a desire and the desire becomes internalized, it's yours. It's conceived. At that point, you've got it. Ego is is probably a separate subject from that. It really has to do with the seduction of your own will.
Wow, that's interesting. So you believe that the devil is implanting certain thoughts into people's minds, basically?
Totally. So when the Bible talks about spiritual warfare, it's kind of interesting how Paul, the apostle, dealt with it. Now, he was beaten, he was scarred, he was physically disfigured by the abuses he went through. An unusual kind of guy. But he kept on preaching his message. He said that the weapons of our warfare are not physical, but mighty through the Spirit of God to the tearing down of strongholds, to the casting down of imaginations, to the taking captive of arguments and bringing them under the authority of Christ. Meaning, he dealt with the realm of ideas. So to answer your question, spiritual warfare with the devil is about human beings. Think like Charlie Kirk. I'm here in this environment here, at a turning point type of event. And what has he done? He's a young guy who went out and said, I'm going to take my worldview and I'm not just going to believe it, I'm going to export it. And I'm going to take all the heat, but I'm going to plant myself on a college campus. I'm going to say, come change my mind, like a Steve Crowder, change my mind. And people look at the courage and clarity of somebody that thinks differently and they can defend the proposition. What's he doing? It's what Paul said. He is taking captives thoughts and ideas and bringing them under the power of a truth that he himself believes.
Right. And he's doing it on college campuses, which is needed because a lot of these universities are on the left, right?
Yeah, well, they're ideologically captured. So in the worldview that I come from, I look at every sphere, like you take those spheres, what are they? They're like religion, family, education, government, media, arts, business, 7 of them. And the education realm, the campuses would be under a stronghold. So you go to some place like Harvard. The first official protest I ever had was at a Harvard campus. I was asked to go up there and speak to a student. Suddenly there's an organized protest against me. I had no idea that my ideas were that radical. It was when I left the church and I went into academia that I encountered organized opposition. Then I thought, man, I guess what I'm teaching must be more powerful than I thought. Because what happened was I got the campus atheists and agnostics and areas that were involved with witchcraft and Salem, they all came out to protest. And I was totally naive. I thought, what are they mad at me for? They didn't even know what I teach. That's when I realized something. Harvard was originally founded to be a school for the training of Christians for ministry. It has so deviated from that original mandate that it now is a stronghold for ideologies hostile to Christ.
Wow.
So that a Christian, who was the original purpose of Harvard, which was come up here, we're going to make you smarter and more competent, they actually now persecute the ideas of Christ.
Yeah.
So I thought, is this possible? You look up Princeton University, you look up Harvard, you look up Yale, you'll find that the founding of those universities was by Christians for Christian influence, and that over a period of time, it departed from that. And Jesus said this. He said, when a house is swept clean, it's occupied, but if it isn't occupied properly, 7 times worse spirits that are cast out will go back and take it. Meaning that an ideological stronghold that God puts in the earth that isn't vigilantly kept will become a stronghold for hell, more powerful than the stronghold it had for Christ. It's just, Jesus was the one who taught that.
You know, we're living in an age where Christians are nervous. Christians are waffling in their commitment. Preachers aren't really preaching a clear message. We don't know if we're raptured out or if we're supposed to go to the voting booth and take a stand. The truth of the matter is, all that confusion dissipates when you get a fresh revelation of Jesus. God wants to give the church a fresh discovery of who Jesus is, because Jesus actually manifests himself in different ways in different periods of time. When he first came, John the Baptist was very confused. He had seen the Lord coming with a baptism of fire, and he was going to burn up the chaff, and he was going to shake things up. And Jesus actually came as a sacrifice. Well, end time Jesus is coming back as the judge of nations, and most Christians are looking for the Lamb. He's coming as a lion. Now, if you get this revelation of who Jesus is right now, it doesn't dissipate the beauty of his merciful forgiveness or his love. It just adds this realization that he's coming with authority, and he wants his church to straighten up its back and begin to realize that the soon coming king is coming as the judge of nations. The revelation of end time Jesus will put a mantle in your life that will embolden you with clarity and confidence. The thing that is missing most in the body of Christ, the fear of the Lord, and the boldness of the first century church is about to come to you with this powerful revelation. Go to lancewallnau.com, End Times Jesus. That's lancewallnau.com/End Times Jesus. And you're going to hear this explosive, fresh, new revelation that just came to me recently this year, that God wants the church to straighten up and strengthen itself because Jesus is coming with the armies of heaven, and he's coming to do battle.
How do you think the universities got to this point? Do you think it was a gradual thing, or did it happen over maybe 100-year period?
You know, it's interesting. It certainly was gradual. And then it's like Hemingway said, it was gradually and then suddenly, you know? So I think if you look at the psychological journey of it, it happened during the Scopes monkey trials. Something happened in the psychology of Christianity. And during if you look it up, what is that, like the 20s or 30s? So you had Clarence Darrow is now defending the atheist viewpoint of science versus the creation viewpoint.
Yeah.
And the problem was that Christians became embarrassed at the Scopes monkey trial because what got juxtaposition was science versus the Bible. And they brought out William Jennings Bryan, who was a great orator, ran for president twice, and was a preacher, really, who they put on the stand to defend the Bible against science. The mistake they made, they should have got a creationist scientist, because then they could have broken this sapsucker down and said, oh, you believe that? Well, here's the facts about that. If you get a creationist now against a scientist, the two of them are going to have a real knockout. Joe Rogan would have a lot of fun with it, because the creation scientists are every bit as sophisticated as the atheist science. And then you come down to the argument of, well, I guess it's a question of what you believe. It's faith. After all, it isn't science. But the church world, my brother, became self-conscious after the Scopes monkey trial. That is the moment when you see Harvard shift to the left.
Wow. So 20s and 30s?
Yeah, Princeton shift to the left, Yale. And what did the Christians do? They said, well, the Bible's still true. And so what they did was they created Wheaton, and they created the Bob Jones University, and they separated from the secular culture. They created a subculture and said, we're not a secular, we are sacred. Now the secular sacred split is what your generation has got to sort out, because you've been taught this territory is secular and this one is. So when we go into politics, for instance, a guy like me, I could go in and be outspoken, but because I am a believer, I get so much heat. I did one meeting in a rally in Pittsburgh before the election.
Yeah.
J.D. Vance was looking for a place to do a meeting. I said, well, man, I got all your clergy here at my meeting. I had like around 500 or 600 people there, 700. I said, I'll tell you what, I've already got the Civic Center that we're using. I'll give it up to you for like 2 hours, and I'll just walk off. Use my set. I've already got the thing set up. We'll just pay a little more for Secret Service. And I had 40 media company, outlets that signed up that wanted to cover J.D. Vance. So they were coming to my event, so I just proved them all. Now, when the event happens, I got so much heat because now the Washington Post and, Wall Street Journal and NPR, Christian nationalists, now that J.D. Vance dared to put himself in proximity to a platform. I was being generous because I want to see him win.
Yeah.
And so I said, I'll pay for it. And I did. I said, no, I'll even do it I got a business. I said, my business will sponsor it, so no one will accuse me of being like a church and state problem.
Yeah.
It didn't matter. I got nasty letters. We're going to audit you.
Wow.
We're going to come after you. You flipping Christian Nazi nationalist. And I'm thinking, dang, what is it that when we move outside of the sacred area of just the next life and we start to become believers that invade a campus or get involved with politics and say, actually, Jesus' words apply to all of life. The Bible is applicable to economics. It's applicable to families, it's applicable to education. It's not weak. It's actually very profound. The moment you take it in there, you get pushed back like you wouldn't believe. It's like all the vipers come out of the bushes.
Yeah.
And so I was shocked at that, but it happened at Harvard. I showed up just to speak. There's a protest. The JD Vance shows up at my event, and then all hell breaks loose. And I'm just saying, there must be something powerful to the ideas that Jesus has, that the moment that they unveil themselves in spheres outside of a building in a church on Sunday, they become controversial.
Yeah, I see that with a lot of pastors, man. They have one controversial political take and then they start losing members of their church, you know?
Yeah, so what do you do with that? Well, in your case, when you're seeing that, what's the typical response?
I mean, I just feel for them. I report on the story. I have them on the podcast to share their side. But at the end of the day, media is against them. So they're going to push all these negative articles like what happened to you.
Here's my theory. I think we just need to reorganize. After looking at Trump's victory, I believe we had like around 40 million evangelical believers, probably like 15 million pro-life Catholics that made up a big margin. I believe there's enough people out there that actually are faith people, that if they ever organized, they could break down the opposition. Because you take a church like that, there's 300,000 churches in America, basically, independent churches. 1/3 of them are what we call like they espouse to be Bible believing, whatever. So you got 100,000 of them, and of them, only about 20,000 or 20% are willing to be courageous enough to be MAGA, pro-Trump. And I mean, just say, I'll take it on the chin. I don't care because I'm going to. So you don't have that many churches out there, and they lose people. Okay, so here's what they do. I think we ought to be taking the people that aren't going to church and the people that are going to weak churches and redirecting them to churches that have the courage to speak the truth. So you start to put a list out as to, there was a guy once named C.T. Studd, who was a missionary in Africa from Cambridge University. He got saved at a revival with 5 other students. They were like real world famous because they're all like big super stud athletes, and they all take off for ministry. So they're kind of the Cambridge 7, they were called. He goes to Africa, and he referred to chocolate soldiers, the guys that would start off as Christians, and he said chocolate soldiers that melt in the heat of combat. And I never forgot that, chocolate soldiers, because we have a lot of plastic pulpits that melt in the heat of combat. Whether it's COVID or whether it's censorship or whether it's don't talk politics and then don't talk this, don't talk that. I think if we were to literally have the plastic pulpit review in every state and list the churches that eschew and avoid controversial subjects for fear of backlash, and then we would list the churches that are courageous and willing to stand for truth, I'd love to see that list out in public, because I think there's a lot of people that would not go to the plastic pulpit that are looking for people that have conviction and courage and clarity.
Yeah, I think times are changing. I think more people want that, right? We'll see how it plays out.
Well, we'll see. But there again, it has to be organized.
Yeah.
So, the agonizing is in the organizing.
Yeah. Do you believe there's any biblical prophecies in the Bible when it comes to politics and specifically Trump?
I think that Donald Trump, when he ran as the 45th president of the United States, Sean, he was elected by 150,000 votes in like Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan combined, like 120,000 votes out of the 80 million that voted. What I'm saying is it was a small margin that got him in 2016. Nobody thought he was going to get in there. And I helped to make that happen in part because I was the first Christian that said, actually, Donald Trump is the one that God's got his hand on. And it's not. We had Christians, we had Huckabee, we had Cruz, we had Ben Carson, we had Catholic Marco Rubio. We had all kinds of Christians running. But God chose the guy from Queens on his 3rd marriage, who's a business guy from The Apprentice. This didn't go down well with a lot of my friends, but I thought the Lord told me, go to Isaiah 45. And I read Isaiah 45. And the Lord spoke to me at that time, as best as I can hear him, that the next president of the United States will be an Isaiah 45 president. And the 45th president will be Isaiah 45. So right away, I go to Google. I'm thinking, dang, am I hearing voices in my head? And I look up what number's the next president. And it says, Barack Obama was 44, the next is 45. So now I go to Isaiah 45. Should have started there, actually. And it says, thus says the Lord to Cyrus, who's a Persian, not a Jew, whom I have anointed to go through the 2-leaf gates of Babylon to break the gates of iron. And he will undo the belts of his adversaries. He will make the crooked places straight. And then catch this. And all this he will do for my people's sake, though he does not even know who I am. Right away, a light bulb went off. I said, who's the only candidate that's running right now that doesn't claim to be a Christian? I mean, everybody says they're a Christian, but who's the one that doesn't know who God is? They're all, I knew who the guys were running. They were almost, and then Pence was also in the mix. I said, my gosh, they're all evangelicals running against each other. This is a weird election. And the one guy God chose was a Cyrus, the man who does not know who I am, and my hand is on him. So I started telling people, I said, you may not like this, and they don't make me popular, but when the primaries are over, Donald Trump will be remaining. He'll be the one.
Wow.
And they said, no, you're crazy. And I said, let's see. I'm not saying I'm not crazy. I'm just saying I'm hearing a voice. If people hear voices, can be crazy.
I mean, he was a heavy underdog in 16, so
Totally.
you called that early.
Totally. So when I'm in Jerusalem, 2 weeks before a couple of weeks before the election, 2016, and I wrote a book on God's chaos candidate about Donald Trump, telling my story that I think this guy's going to be president. And I told the story about Cyrus, how God chooses rulers in the earth that are for his people. And at the time that he chooses them, their own piety is not the issue. The issue is whether God's hand is on them. And that would be Lincoln during the Civil War, who was an annoyance to the revivalists because Lincoln didn't even go to church. You got Charles Finney in the Second Great Awakening, and you got the main guy leading the nation through the crisis. They're pulling their hair out. They're going, we need a man of God. Here's a guy that's kind of like joking about stuff. Lincoln was the man God chose. Churchill was a man God chose. Neither of them was a card-carrying evangelical. They didn't go to church. They didn't fit. Trump fits that bill, a Cyrus type. So 2 weeks before the election, this Access Hollywood video comes out. For your younger demographic, it is the most lurid, embarrassing, graphic, locker room spiel you'll ever hear a guy talk about him with other girls. It was from 10 years earlier. He was with a guy named Billy Bush talking, and someone recorded it. And he's talking about womenizing and how he does it, and he's a celebrity, he's a rich guy, he gets whatever he wants. It was a disaster.
Yep.
So I'm in Jerusalem. I just wrote my book. I published it 2 days earlier, so confident that Trump's going to be president. And I got a phone call while I'm there. Can you recall the book?
Whoa.
I said, what? Yeah, didn't you hear, man? That Access Hollywood video, man. They're even talking about Pence may have to run instead of him. They're actually discussing it. Like, oh my God. Well, how bad can it be? He goes, well, it's pretty bad. I go, well, how bad is bad? I have him read to me. I go, all right, stop reading. That's pretty bad. That's pretty bad. So at that moment, I took my iPhone, just like this. I went up to my room in the Mount Zion Hotel, and I said, as a Christian would, I said, dear God, how could I have been so deceived? How could I have gotten thinking that you're talking to me? You weren't talking to me. And so many times I prayed, God, if this isn't you, let me know. So I'm sitting there going, I'm humiliated. I was wrong. I'm completely wrong. I never should have been involved with politics in the first place. I knew it. I shouldn't have gotten involved. At that moment, I felt like the Lord said, open your mouth and I'll fill it. I figured I better say something because I had 2,000 books sold.
Yeah.
It ended up being 120,000 before I got done.
Wow.
So I go on my little Facebook. I got like 1 million followers on Facebook. I figured I better do some damage control. I said, you're probably wondering about the recent rumors about Donald Trump and that Access Hollywood video. And I said, you're probably wondering, why would God let that happen if, in fact, does the Lord want Hillary to be president? Is this the way it's going to go? And I said, here's my theory. I don't believe that God is caught by surprise. And I'm processing myself like live on like in front of a camera.
Yeah.
I figure I could delete it if it's really a disaster. I said, well, and I would agree with you that this is a pretty bad thing, but God must have known it was going to happen. God knew it was going to happen. And here's what I'm going to tell you. If Donald Trump was elected president, he'd take credit for it because he's a proud man. But now Donald Trump, as president, will know it was an act of God because he's going to have to overcome a very serious setback. I said, besides that, when he was interviewed, he never felt that he had a sin to confess. Now he's got one. He's going to go public and talk about how he has to deal with this thing. So when I got done, I hit send. It went to 4 million people. That's why I believe the 4 million evangelicals that watched it, out of it probably we have like around 120,000 and the ultimate margin that showed up because they really didn't want Hillary to win and they liked Trump. They didn't know why, but they needed an argument for why. And I believe God gave it to me. He's a Cyrus. It's a ruler in the Bible that isn't necessarily a Christian who God raises up for a purpose. That video from that balcony at the Mount Zion Hotel, it went out, and I believe that was a decisive factor in the election. So do I believe in prophecy and in the Bible? Do I believe there's patterns that are showing up in history? Absolutely.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredible. He's hanging around a lot of Christians now, so there's a chance he might turn.
Oh, well, listen, he's already, I mean, from now, this is like 10 years later. So what do we know? Or 8 years later, he's prayed with Christians. He knows.
Right.
I mean, what's so funny about it is I've talked to like 3 different preachers this, so I prayed with Donald Trump and he's accepted the Lord. That's Christianese for, he prayed a prayer. And I'm thinking, this poor guy probably thinks he's got to do that repentance prayer every time he sees a preacher. It's like, I believe he's got what he needs. And that assassination attempt was a profound moment for him. I think when he really questioned whether or not God kept him alive. He knows. He's a very pragmatic man.
Yeah.
He knows the odds of him turning his head at that moment in the presentation, going to that slide, that graph that he goes to 20 minutes into his presentation, he goes into it 8 minutes in. He knows it was an unusual disruption of his normal. He believes God saved him for a reason.
Yeah, a logical person would say that was just, it just happened, but a believer would say God played a hand in that, right?
Precisely. And I'm sure that he did.
Yeah, that was a crazy moment. I couldn't believe it, honestly. What unfolded after that.
Well, where were you when it happened? How did you find out?
Where was I? I think I was at home, but I was at home. Blake Wynn called me, Steve Wynn's nephew. He's a big donor.
Okay.
And he told me, you need to post about this, because at the time, social media influencers, if they posted support, would get a lot of hate. So he's like, you need to post. So I finally posted that I endorsed him,
Well, how's it now? Do you find it's lightening up a little bit for guys like you?
Yeah, definitely a lot. In 16, you would get canceled. In 20, it was pretty rough. 24 got a lot better.
So you think about that. I lost 250,000 subscribers on YouTube.
Wow.
They wiped them out. 250,000. If my business model was based on that, I would have been out of business.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I didn't base my business model on likes or views because I knew that I could get canceled. But there's something that's happening in terms of a movement of young men, particularly as a demographic. Well, you've seen it with minorities. You've seen it certainly with the Hispanic vote too. But to see what's happening with young men, it's as though now with Elon Musk, with Donald Trump, with that moment of the assassination, Trump getting up and saying, fight. But I think there are inflection points in history that create a psychological imprint. That moment was when masculine energy no longer became associated with something toxic, but became associated with something almost courageous. And I think that plus guys like Charlie Kirk that were working on the campuses, and then Barron Trump, who took his dad. And I tell people, here's the 3 phases of Donald Trump. He's, for his people that love him, he's idolized. Then by the secular press, he's demonized. And then when he went on podcast, he became humanized.
Wow.
Now your generation looked at him, having heard all this other crap, but you're also listening to Joe Rogan, you're listening to, other sources, and you go, I'll give the guy a chance.
Yeah.
Let me just hear him be totally chill and neutral as best I can. And he sells himself as a non-threat, certainly not Hitler.
Yeah.
And certainly not, the crazy red-orange felon who's looking for women to rape in the lobby. And it's like, what the heck, man? And then you start questioning the credibility of what you heard.
Right.
Now, as they go on in this toxic rant, the late night kind of, whether it's the comedians or it's Rachel Maddow, young men are looking at that going, they're off. Matter of fact, I identify less with them and more with Rogan and Musk and Trump and Vivek and Tucker and listening to them. So a seismic shift is happening right now. And it creates a window. And it's a question. So I believe now you got people that can come out and not only just speak regarding Trump, but think about how X became a whole space that you can go into courageously and say, I'm just going to say what I want to say.
Right.
And I'm going to say the quiet part out loud. Oh my gosh, and I'm still on, and people are liking it and commenting on it.
I love it. Yeah, alternative media and X really changed the election outcome, I believe. I remember growing up as a kid, if you even watched the news, you would never question if it was fact or fiction. I would just believe every single thing I saw, but Trump really changed the narrative on that.
Oh, totally. And he did, and that's why he's a blunt force. Listen, Cyrus when that verse in Isaiah 45 came out, I went from there to the second time I thought I heard a voice speaking to me about Trump. I heard Donald Trump is a wrecking ball to the spirit of political correctness. And I thought the spirit of political correctness, it was like a speech suppression strategy that was in the atmosphere. And Donald Trump is a wrecking ball. So when I started watching him do his press conferences, and he refers to fake news. I don't know if you can go back and watch that. You're fake news.
Yeah.
You're fake news. You know what you're, no, sit down. You're fake news. That moment was the rebranding of what news is. So I would go around the world. So I traveled like around 70 countries.
Wow.
With different networks I work with. And I'd get off a plane and I'd be met by pastors that are from Africa or from Europe or from Asia. And the person they go to me is fake news. They were, because they knew I was into Trump, but that was the only connection. They started with fake news. The world was hearing it also, and they were questioning the credibility of establishment narratives. That's the ultimate grenade, because then you come in to find out you cannot trust that establishment narrative.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Lance, it's been awesome, man. Where can people keep up with you and follow you?
Sure. Lance Wallnau. You go to lancewallnau.com/podcast, and we do news, current events from a prophetic perspective.
Awesome. We'll link below. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, my brother.
See you guys.
Did you enjoy this latest episode? Please remember to share it with your friends, because the more knowledge you have, the better equipped you are to navigate the world.